Welcome to Wine Soundtrack South Africa. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Marina Kalo, and today I'm joined by Charlie Brain from Lubanzi Wines. Charlie, a very warm welcome. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. My name's Charlie Brain. So I'm one of the sort of co-owners and co-founders of Lubanzi. And we started the business about 7 years ago, myself and a good friend of mine at the time named Walker Brown, who we originally met actually as exchange students here in South Africa, so both from the US. And we began the business back in 2016, sort of alongside two winemakers who grew up here, Bruce Jack and Sauvignon Blanc, the latter who's sort of still with the business today. But I grew up originally in Kansas, so the very middle of the U.S., far, far from the ocean, and yeah, far from wine country of any kind, really.
Do you have red ruby shoes?
No, I don't have red ruby shoes, but every person I meet here in South Africa loves to bring up Wizard of Oz as soon as I mention Kansas. So
yeah, it had to be done. Sorry about that. Okay, so Lubanzi. I'd like you to tell me how that all came about, but also the name Lubanzi. Let's start with that. Where did you get that from, and what is the meaning behind that?
Yeah, so Lubanzi is actually named after a dog. We started the business, like I said. Walker and I originally met as exchange students at the University of Cape Town. So at the time I was studying social work. Walker was doing, I think, some classes in politics, maybe philosophy as well. And we, towards the end of our studies, took the Inner Cape, which is sort of the bus here in South Africa, all the way across the country. So to the Eastern Cape, to a little area called the Transkei, or the Wild Coast. And it was there that we decided to basically backpack all the way along this coast for 6 days and covering 160 kilometers. And the very first day into the trip, there was a dog. His name, we actually named him Quincy at first. We can never really recall why, but he began following us, and it was our second day where we got to have backpackers, and some locals that ran the backpackers said to us, hey, you guys brought Lubanzi, and explained that they'd seen the dog for the last few years, and he sort of, was known for following people backpacking up and down this coastline, and he ended up sticking with us for our entire sort of 6-day, 160 kilometer or 100 miles, if you'd prefer, adventure, all the way to the very end. And when we started the winery a number of years later, we decided to sort of name it all after him, in the spirit of adventure, and because it was such a wonderful story to tell people.
That's a great story. Do you ever know what happened to Lubanzi after you moved on and did your thing, or did he just wander the plains of the Wild Coast for until the end?
Yeah. We don't quite know. Lubanzi, was notorious for following people, and he stuck with us all the way until the end of our journey. Sort of actually disappeared, I remember, the last night. We presumed he must have found somebody else with better food, and that was the last we sort of saw of him. And we sort of presumed after leaving that he kind of continued on following people on that path, and I think hopefully to this day is doing the exact same thing.
Very cool, very cool. So you don't have your own land per se. You work with a lot of different winemakers. What is the model? How does it work?
Yeah, no, exactly. We don't. And I don't know if we ever will. I think a lot of winemakers start the way we start and aspire to one day kind of have their own land. But I think, we do understand we're Americans, and we actually have no interest in really owning property here in South Africa. I think we feel that really belongs to South Africans. But we work with a number of different winemakers right now to produce our wines. So Sauvignon Blanc, Johann Meyer, Jürgen Haus, different people to kind of make wines that we think really reflect the best parts of the Swartland, which is where our focus is. So yeah, we're working with them, and through them, I'd say about maybe a dozen different farmers that the grapes are coming through. All people who are kind of specialists in different things. So we're producing Chenin Blanc, a Rhone style sort of Syrah, Grenache, Mourvèdre blend, a Cinsault Rosé, another Cinsault Pet Nat, as well as a skin contact orange wine made from Chenin. So our real favorites and our love and our passions definitely Chenin and Cinsault. In fact, we're making even more versions of both going forward. But yeah, we're really unique in that we work essentially across a different range of winemakers, a different range of farms, a different range of cellars. And so much like Lubanzi, very much sort of like a wandering operation.
Nice. And some cool winemakers that you work with as well, which kind of gives its own personality, which is great. What is your annual production roughly every year?
Yeah, so we started in 2016, very small, basically making a few hundred cases of Chenin and a few hundred cases of that Rhone blend. It's actually evolved quite a lot over the years, so we're now producing about 30,000 cases of wine, sort of 12-pack, and yeah, just have kind of been making a few more wines here and there and sort of growing the production over the years, but I've really been fortunate to see it grow from a very small sort of operation to something with a little bit of size.
No, it's decent size, that's for sure. And speaking of size, which markets are you in? Other than here in South Africa, where can our listeners find your wine?
Yeah, you can find our wines in the US as well as in Canada, so sort of all over North America, which is definitely our sort of biggest market, I would say. You can also find us in a few places around Europe, so the UK, Sweden, soon to be Norway, as well as in Asia, so in Hong Kong, and in Australia, locally here in South Africa, of course, as well, and in Japan as well. So sort of a range of countries around the world.
Now, Charlie, I need to ask you, why wine? What made you turn to wine in South Africa, of all things?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of my favorite stories to tell, and I'll kind of touch more on myself, one of my favorite stories to tell is how even in South Africa, there's sort of this connection. So back home from Kansas City, which is, kind of half in Kansas and half in Missouri. It's a strange city where we kind of are in two states at once. But back home there in Missouri, there's actually quite a lot of wine grown, very surprisingly. At one time was sort of the epicenter of American wine production. And there's a story about how the phylloxera epidemic actually really ended up relying on this very part of the world, Missouri, for rootstock that was phylloxera resistant. And so it was that same rootstock that sort of got uprooted and obviously sent through to Europe and eventually made its way down here to South Africa, that originates in all places of Missouri. So I love to tell people that South African wine, in a way, is grown from Missouri roots. And so there's this funny little connection I have with it. But yeah, I grew up actually, family was in the wine business back home in America. And so not so much in winemaking, but sort of in the sale, distribution, importing of wine. And so I grew up in the business and knew quite a lot about it that way. And when I first came here to South Africa, my passion was really in social work, which is a big component of our business that actually is quite unique. And really, wine for us was so symbolic of, I think, a problem we were trying to solve, where we were coming from abroad and we were saying to ourselves, wow, this place, this like part of the world is so amazing. And why has nobody told us about it? And I think wine was a great representation of that, where we were sitting there and I was saying, I come from a wine background, and how do I not know more about South African wine? How am I not more exposed to it? So for us, there were so many different things. We were trying to introduce people to how amazing we felt this corner of the world is, We were looking for an opportunity, and we felt like wine was it. And it also happened to be the thing that we really, knew how to do.
Fair enough. That's interesting. Who would have thought that rootstock from Missouri is what saved the wine industry? Essentially, one can almost make that claim, right?
Right.
So, I know you were one of the first brands to can wine in South Africa, which is really awesome. But what is your most expensive wine in your portfolio at the moment?
Yeah, so we do sort of a range of cans as well as bottles, kegs in some markets, which is an interesting topic.
Yeah.
But the most expensive wines we produce truly aren't all that expensive. Here in South Africa, around 250 Rand a bottle would be our pet nat that we produce. It's a single vineyard pet nat grown from like a very small block of organic grapes. Very lightly pressed, so we don't get a ton of extraction. Completely natural winemaking process. But priced similarly to the sort of skin contact Chenin Blanc we do, which is also from a very sort of series of very small blocks and produced in a small volume, again with like a very natural winemaking process. So both of those wines, but neither really quite expensive. So, in the US we're talking maybe $25, $30 a bottle. In Europe, 20, 25 euros a bottle, and here in South Africa, around 250 Rand. So we tend not to make, we're very much everyday wine people. We don't quite yet make anything that's really top shelf.
Yeah. I must admit, I looked at your social media, your Instagram profile as well, and it's fun. I think if I had to put a word to Lubanzi just by looking at your social media, it's fun. It's a fun brand. It's about the lifestyle and being outdoors and having a wine on the beach or just with your friends as the sun sets, maybe some cool grooves in the background. That's really what I get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we surprise people with how serious we are about the wine. But that said, when you give 20-somethings the reins over a wine brand, they do want to connect, with people their age. And people our age aren't wine experts. It takes like a lifetime to really develop the knowledge and appreciation. So we're trying to, in a lot of ways, like meet them at their level and just honestly have a great time with it. I think, we were motivated to can the wine in a lot of ways, not just because we felt like there was an opportunity there, but because we felt like it would be great if wine could actually accompany you sort of on the adventures that life involves. So things like going to the beach, taking a hike, getting outside, going camping, going surfing. As people who drink wine ourselves and not other things so much, we felt it was only sort of fair and right that wine should be able to join you on those kind of things. And we certainly have a really good time with it. I mean, after all, we're named after a dog, so we can't take ourselves too seriously.
Named after a dog, yes. But I must say, I really love the branding as well. It's very funky, it's modern, but it's also sophisticated. And I think that kind of branding would appeal to your younger wine lover, which is great. I mean, we need to get these millennials on board to wine, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Charlie, as a consumer, what do you enjoy drinking?
I love things that like get outside the box. In terms of, even if it's just like a unique approach to a label, I think that's interesting. If it's a unique approach to the winemaking itself, I find it interesting. I think in a lot of ways, our generation is less interested, for better or worse, in tradition. Mm-hmm. And so people that are sort of like trying to do things a bit differently and break the mold, I think excites me. I had like a Cap Classique style wine that is sort of, rather than a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, a blend of Pinotage and Chardonnay. And even just that kind of like thinking outside the box, to me, is exciting. Because it just means like, somebody's willing to sort of like break the rules, break the boundaries, and try something that hasn't been tried before. So I'm always looking for creativity, and I'm always looking for things that are sort of small and unique. I think, really, rather than supporting sort of the tried and true, I'm trying to support sort of the things that are new, that are owned by individuals that have a lot of sort of heart and soul in them.
Yeah, I get that. I think there's so much out there, and there's so much exciting stuff to try that, to limit yourself in today's day and time is silly. So to be able to try new and fun and exciting wines and brands, there's so much. What would you say in your opinion is one of the most exciting things about South African wine at the moment?
Yeah, I think we're glad to sort of have found this industry, this sort of community when we did. We certainly have like an outside looking in perspective, having not grown up here but now been here, for 7 years. I think we feel like there's a real generational shift happening with South Africa, where you're seeing more and more sort of an increasing emphasis on small production wines, on small production farming, and away from larger sort of co-op systems, more streamlined winemaking facilities. You're seeing a lot of like small cellars, a lot of like unique labels, just more of an emphasis on craft. And I think it's really part of South Africa's changing reputation globally, from being a wine producing country that is more well known for producing sort of large bulk wine at scale, and more known for producing really fine wine, things that sort of can stand up against the best from other corners of the world. And I think it's really cool to be a part of sort of that, redefining that image here in South Africa. Of course, it's always been producing amazing small production things. I mean, it made Napoleon's favorite wine. But on a big level, there's certainly an evolution happening here in South Africa that's worth taking note of.
I agree. It's such an exciting time for our industry right now. There's so much going on, and a lot of it is really very exciting. Despite all of the challenges, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. I'm going to be awfully presumptuous here, and assume that you would have some time in your life had a hangover. So, do you perhaps have a hangover cure that you could share with us?
Wow, I wish, because then I want to deal with this myself. I'm certainly one of those people that refuses to take any painkillers. Okay. I feel like you deserve to suffer for your sins. So no, I think I'm one of those people who actually just quite embraces the struggle and doesn't really seek a way out of it. I don't know if I'm the best one to recommend a hangover cure.
I think I need to give you some hangover cures afterwards. Definitely. All right. So I know you don't have a dedicated tasting room or your own kind of spot, but if a UFO were to land outside of your house and they have been traveling for light years, they're very thirsty, what would you serve them to drink from your range?
Yeah, cans of Chenin.
Cans of Chenin.
Yeah, I think cans of Chenin. For me, it's a perfect welcome to Cape Town thing, because the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that we have the can of Chenin, but I'm going to suggest that we sort of take it up the mountain and have it with a view. I think Chenin Blanc for us is the most important grape from our perspective in this country. So it's certainly the wine I would pick. And then I think one of the things I think South Africa has to offer in spades is just this like natural beauty. And that's what really connects with people that visit here for the first time, I find. They're just really blown away. I think everyone that has come, when I meet in the US, they say, man, I went to South Africa. It was just way more beautiful than I ever expected. And so I think almost just as important as the wine itself is that sort of outdoors experience, and cans allow for that. So, yeah, cans of Chenin.
I like that, and I think they'll quite enjoy the cans of Chenin. So some people read tea leaves in the bottom of a cup to tell the future. If you could read the sediment that is left over in a glass after an old red wine had been drunk, what would that sediment tell you about the future for Lubanzi?
Wow, great question. Yeah, we started this business having literally zero plan on where it would take us. We were very young at the time. I think it was very much one of those situations where you sort of have to get yourself in over your head, and then you just begin by digging yourself out. And for the first couple of years, you're just constantly asking yourself, why did I do this to myself? I don't know. I think for us, we have aspirations and dreams about growing, about having our own tasting room, about being able to sort of continue to tell our story. And I don't know, I think we just want to keep believing in ourselves, sort of being underdogs. And I think more than anything, hope to, not only grow the business, but probably hope to really grow sort of the impact we make. Lubanzi, we have a lot of social and environmental missions that go alongside our wine, and furthering those things such that they become like real touch points of significance in the industry, where people can point to them and say, look at what they're doing, would be, I think really amazing for us.
Do you have some examples of these?
Yeah, for sure. We work with, one of the sort of most well-known, amazing nonprofit organizations here in the Winelands, which is called the Pebbles Project. So at the end of every year, half the profits from our business fund programs that they operate, and started again very small with them, but have grown quite significantly over the year. So we now have, we have a special education sort of mobile learning center that does an after-school program. It's this cool van. We sponsored sort of year-round medical dental care for about 250 people. We kind of operate now a dozen different early child education centers. We have an after-school center. We fund a baby box program, a maternal education program, sort of a skills training center for young adults. So a lot of what I would kind of consider small to medium-sized programs. But, we've certainly seen other wineries and other wine farms do really significant transformative projects, like Creation, for example, that does work with Pebbles as well, built a school sort of out in the Hermanus area. And I think really kind of important sort of significant touchstones like that would probably be a dream of ours.
I must say I'm also really a huge fan of Pebbles and what they do at the Pebbles Project. It's really incredible, with whether it's education or health or general support for families. I think it's a really, really wonderful organization. So it's great that you're involved there. When you were little, what did you want to be?
Wow. I loved sports more than anything.
Okay.
I used to like all the books I would read as a kid was about these are American sports, basketball, American football. And for a long time, I really wanted to be an American football coach. I think I watched enough sports documentaries, Friday Night Lights, to feel like those moments were so inspiring that's what I wanted to do with my life. And then for a long time, I studied social work in school and really saw myself as somebody who would end up traveling to sort of the far corners of the world to do social work programs. In fact, just before sort of beginning Lubanzi, was either sort of considering a move back to South Africa to begin this wine business, or it was to go to Tonga for the Peace Corps. So I think a few different ambitions for sure. But I guess, I don't know, getting out there, making a mark, whether it's in sports or in helping people, certainly a dream.
Yeah, it's a good dream to have. And today, do you still participate or do any sports?
No, I wish. The sports here in South Africa, I don't think I'm the right size for. I'd love to play rugby, but I think I'd be a little bit undersized for the field. So yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah, and I suppose you also just love your brain and your neck and your back. As much as I love rugby, and especially, I don't play, obviously, but watching it, dangerous. Music. Are you into music? Do you have any particular genres or singers or groups or bands or whatever that you're into?
Yeah, I love music. I'm one of those people that's sort of fond of all genres. Probably not so much the extremes. I can't say I've ever really been into things like death metal. But I love acoustic sort of folk styles of music. I actually really love jazz. In fact, one of the wine labels we do is a collaboration with a South African jazz album called Ndaba Is, which is quite cool and worth listening to, because there's really an amazing jazz scene here in South Africa that deserves sort of more I guess representation and a seat at the table outside of the country than it gets, but it is growing. And I actually do love a lot of South African artists. You know, I just recently finished the biography, Johnny Clegg's autobiography. Huge fan of his. Was very sad when Rodriguez passed away. It was one of my first experiences sort of connecting to South Africa, was watching that documentary in the US, and it's one of my favorite stories to tell people. So yeah, there's a lot of, I think, amazing music here that I feel like deserves more recognition abroad, much like the wine. But things of that nature, acoustic, folk, guitar, instrumental type things, which may be a little out of touch with my generation, but it's a little more old school.
Well, I don't think it's out of touch with your generation at all. I think it's the beauty of the world we find ourselves in today, is that we have so many options, and it's right at our fingertips on our phones, you know, to have apps like Spotify and Deezer and Apple Music, and it's all there, you know. I remember still going out and buying cassette tapes. I mean, this is giving my age away now, but you know, this was it. I remember as a little girl getting my first ever Walkman. With a cassette that you'd put in. It was awesome. And I think my first ever music was the Beach Boys. That. Anyway, so before I completely sound like an old woman, what would you say, Charlie, was the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Or if you were to give a piece of advice to someone, a life advice, what would it be?
Yeah, it's never too early to begin. It's the best piece of advice I was ever given. I think a lot of people going off on their own to sort of the other side of the world to begin a business in which they have no real previous experience in, it's either bold or foolish. And I think a lot of times there's always going to be a reason not to do something. And the best advice I was ever given was just there's never a better time to begin than now. So figuring out what it is you want to do, I think stop telling yourself that like you need to sort of plan more for it or train more for it. You just need to go out and start doing it, and the rest will follow.
That's really good advice. I like that. It's people are very often scared to break out of their comfort zones, and sometimes you just need to take that leap of faith, and whatever happens, happens. But life will go on, even if it doesn't end up quite going according to plan, as things sometimes do. So, a huge celebrity is caught on camera by the paparazzi, and they're partying the night away in their hand with a can of Lubanzi wine.
Yeah.
Who is that celebrity?
Yeah. This is the easiest question. Yeah. Trevor Noah.
Ah, good old Trevor.
Is our dream celebrity sponsor.
Okay.
I personally love him. In fact, I saw him on Sunday night two days ago. But for us, he's like such a good representation of South Africa. You know, I think oftentimes like we're sort of like translators. We're sort of out in North America or we're in Europe and we're Americans, but we're trying to explain South Africa and South African wine to another person. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I think he just does an amazing job with it. And particularly in the US, we find that everyone sort of points to him as their sort of South African point of reference, touchstone. So yeah, I mean, we would love, Trevor, if you're listening to this, we would love for you to be a part of Lubanzi, or at least just one photo.
Just one, please, Trev. Okay. We need to get a sample drop
Right.
or something to him.
Right.
If you could share any bottle of wine in the world, any wine, with anyone, alive or dead, who would that be and what wine would it be?
Wow, yeah, it's a really great question. Yeah, it's a more of a personal answer. My grandfather, who passed away a few years ago, was probably my biggest fan for Lubanzi. And I keep a photo of him like with a bottle of Chenin on my desk. So it's not the best wine answer. It's not, an amazing region or some amazing wine personality. But yeah, probably just a bottle of Chenin with him, to be quite honest.
That sounds awesome. Absolutely awesome. What sort of wines do you think we'll be drinking in the year 2300?
Yeah, if the planet makes it to 2300.
Adding that caveat.
Some very warm climate grapes, I think, unfortunately. So we're going to have to plan for it being quite hot and quite dry. So I think, yeah, maybe some Syrah would be quite nice in 2300 if we can still do that.
My favorite at the moment, definitely. Are there any wine producing regions in the world that you'd really like to visit and explore a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I think, maybe because I'm American I say this, but for me, Oregon is an amazing region that I'd like to sort of spend more time in. I think because the style of wine they produce connects with us. We're very big on sort of this like lighter, lower alcohol, more drinkable, less oak in the cellar approach to wine, especially like a more minimalistic, low intervention, if not fully natural sort of winemaking style. And all those things are quite alive and well in Oregon right now. And not only that, but there's a lot of youth and there's a lot of creativity and a lot of this sort of breaking the traditions energy. And not only, I think on top of that, there's also a number of wineries that are really dedicated to a lot of different environmental certifications, people who are focused on the farming, being organic or being biodynamic, sort of being in sync with nature. And so I think just a coalescence of all these different factors make me feel like it's a region that I'd connect with personally, and yeah, I'd like to get to know better.
I kind of agree with you. I've also had some really amazing wines from Oregon, and it is an exciting region, that's for sure.
Right.
Very cool. We're almost done. Before I finish, I'd like to play a game with you.
Cool.
So the game involves pairing wine with music. So I'm going to name 3 either styles or varietals, and I'd like you to pair that with either a song or an artist or genre or anything that makes you think this represents this grape or style of wine. So I think it would be wrong not to go in with Chenin Blanc.
Yeah. I'm going to say Chenin Blanc and Jack Johnson banana pancakes. I think it's a great breakfast wine. I really feel like, a rainy day and like a stack of banana pancakes and a bottle of Chenin would be quite a nice experience.
I'm just going to have to do that one day. Totally going to have to do that. Awesome. Love it. Okay. Let's go with Shiraz.
Oh, this is a great one. Without a doubt, the Shiraz is going to be paired with Jimmy Buffett's Cheeseburger in Paradise. Just, I think, only maybe because I've been listening to Jimmy Buffett all week, but I feel like that's just the perfect combo, especially if you do it in a sort of a lighter style like we do. Just goes quite well with the cheeseburger, and then I feel like because it's a lighter style, actually such a nice, maybe put it on a little chill, sort of on a beach somewhere. So I'm just kind of picturing it all coming together in Barbados. Makes a lot of sense to me.
You had to throw in Barbados there. You've got me. I'm there. Let's finish off with Pinotage.
Yeah, Pinotage, sort of a uniquely South African grape, obviously. So obviously I think it's got to go with a song that's uniquely South African. Oh, I'm just going to have to pick a genre and say sort of South African jazz. I feel like connecting those two would work quite well. There's a really amazing jazz band that I've become quite fond of lately called The Brother Moves On. They're based out of Johannesburg. And it's kind of this nice fusion of classical jazz meets sort of your more African tribal type sound. And I think it really kind of, both reflects sort of the history of jazz and what that brings to the world, but also sort of South Africa's own sort of unique contribution. And it's a very young band, so there's a lot of energy to it. And I feel like that actually fits quite well with Pinotage, which obviously has quite deep historical roots, but is uniquely South African, and I think is sort of changing right now in terms of really redeveloping its image. It's a great symbol of South African wine as a whole, where it's sort of transitioning from this old school style of Pinotage grown at a huge level to all these really interesting small production Pinotages that are actually more akin to sort of their parents, Pinot Noir and Cinsault. And in turn, I think when you get outside of South Africa, it's the grape that so many people sit there and say, oh, I've had South African wine, I've had Pinotage, I don't really like it. And then you kind of bring them a modern style of Pinotage, and they sit there and drink it, and they're like, wow, they've completely turned this thing around. It's amazing. And so, what a great symbol, I guess, to end on.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really cool. I love that. Thank you so much for your time and for chatting to us and sharing with us today. Can you please just remind our listeners where they can find Lubanzi online, on social media, if they wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always just Google Lubanzi. We do have a website, it's so funny in the wine industry that not all wineries do. But you can Google us. You can find us in stores in the U.S., kind of Canada, here in South Africa, just a few countries in Europe, but hopefully coming to a few more over the next couple of years. On Instagram, at Lubanzi Wines. So, feel free to reach out anytime.
Super. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack South Africa. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.